in the whole of the Eastern world. And there are no great theologians, fathers of the church in the East, who make any commentary at all about this story in the first 1,000 years. And the actual story only really becomes accepted as part of John's Gospel around the year 900 AD. The story is accepted in the West, but not everywhere. In some old Latin texts, in the great saints Ambrose and Augustine, and in St. Jerome, who translates the scriptures into Latin, and we have the Vulgate. He gives us the common Vulgate, the common translation of the scriptures, and of course it's in there. So it has pride of place in the Western world. Stylistically, we would say it's like St. Luke. It's got the beauty of Luke. And one group of witnesses actually places the story in St. Luke, in chapter 21, towards the end of the ministry of Jesus. Just after it says this: Jesus spent these days teaching in the temple, and when evening came he would go to the Mount of Olives and spend the night there. Early each morning all the people went to the temple to listen to him. And then comes that story. However, in both East and West, it found eventually its home in St. John's Gospel and here. And there, the themes of chapters 7 and 8 sort of make it appropriate that this is where this story is, because the themes centre on judgment. We're going to hear Jesus say, "I pass judgment on no one," in chapter 8 verse 15. We're going to hear him say again, "Can any of you convict me of sin?" Verse 46 in chapter 8. And just another little point, in the popular imagination, the Mount of Olives, which is the setting of this, is seen as the stage of the Last Judgment. And chapter 8 is almost like the final showdown between Jesus and the Jewish authorities. So it's a time of judgment, time of decision. Chapter 8. This beautiful story illustrates the truth that Jesus comes to judge no one. If we're guilty of something, the truth is exposed, but he's not going to judge us. He's not going to take away our guilt. We'll have to seek repentance, of course. The authorities place Jesus in a dilemma. If he says, "Let her go," he's breaking the law. But if he says, "She should be stoned," well, there are a couple of things here that don't quite work. He's acting against the Roman law, which took the right of capital punishment away from the Jewish nation. But perhaps even more importantly, for all the other listeners and for us, Jesus wouldn't want to cruelly follow the law to its rightful end if injustice was not there. The full purpose of the law is not being carried out in this case. He can see this poor woman is a pawn in a scheme to entrap him. So what does he do with this trap? Well, he disengages. He writes in the dust. Perhaps this is a symbolic touch, as is suggested. He bends down to experience our human weakness. As a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion for all those who fear him. For he knows what we are made of. He remembers that we are dust. Psalm 103. And he is eventually left alone with the woman as all the others go. And it's a scene we can almost see. It's so powerful. And the dear, wonderful Augustine puts it so simply, the scene of this woman and Jesus. He says in just a few words, I'll say it in Latin first, relicti sunt duo, miseria et misericordia. It's rather beautiful in Latin. So there are just left only two. Miseria, a woman full of misery, et misericordia, and mercy. So, it's a beautiful scene. Let's now go to the last section, which is Jesus at the treasury. At the start of this course, Jesus says, He's the light of the world. And at the end of this discourse, He says, I am. And that, there's no clearer indication of Jesus' divinity in the whole of the gospel tradition than that. It's an extraordinary climax to the whole of chapter 7 and 8, with the ringing proclamation of Jesus saying, truly, truly, I tell you, before ever Abraham was, I am. Of course, the Jewish people react. They say this is blasphemy, and it is. And so they pick up stones to kill him. However, Jesus hides himself. He hides himself. An expression which recalls the way he arrived in the temple. He came in secret. So it forms a sort of inclusion. Chapter 7 and 8 form a whole. Then Jesus leaves the precincts of the temple. He leaves it, as God did at the time of the exile, leaving the religious leaders now with their theology and their image of God to continue their particular journey, which we're meant in John's eyes to see as the false journey. The rupture between Jesus and Judaism is complete. So within now, we're going to look at this a little bit more closely. Just three little sections here. During the feast of, we're going to look firstly, at Jesus, light of the world. During the Feast of Tabernacles, as well as the morning water ceremony, there was a night ceremony as well in the court of women in the temple. 4 great candlesticks were lit, and men danced under the lights while the Levites sang psalms. It was a spectacle that could be seen from a distance. It may have recalled the pillar of fire which gave light to the Israelites at night time in the desert. And it's against this backdrop that Jesus says, I am the light of the world. No follower of mine shall ever walk in darkness. No, he or she will possess the light of life. One of Augustine's favourite quotations is the following. You gave them drink from the river of your delights, for with you is the fountain of life, and in your light we see light. For you is the fountain of life, and in your light we see light. And that's an extraordinary sense of what happens to us with faith in Jesus. And Isaiah said, the people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. And Jesus says, I am that light. After this, Jesus has to defend himself. He knows his divine origins. and the Father